Also new today, the U.S. has intercepted a second Iranian ship. The Defense Department releasing this video, calling it a sanctioned vessel, previously sanctioned by the U.S. It is noticeable that the U.S. intercepted this ship in the Indian Ocean. That prompts the question, is the U.S. now extending the blockade on Iranian ships in the Strait far beyond the Strait? This latest interception took place
I understand you have new reporting on why the president decided to extend yet another ceasefire deadline.
Yeah, Anderson, what we understand now from our sources is that in between that comment the president made this morning on CNBC when he said he didn't want to extend this ceasefire with Iran as it was set to expire, and between that announcement that he made at 4 o'clock today announcing that he was indeed extending it without giving any new end date to that ceasefire, is a meeting that the president had with his core national security team at the White House. You saw a lot of them going in, as you just noted there, the Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, the Joint Chiefs Chairman, the CIA Director. All of these people were there meeting with the president, and basically they were trying to decide, what they should do next, Anderson. Should the vice president get on his plane and go to Pakistan as he was scheduled to do today, and as basically all the logistics had been put in place for him to leave, or should he not go? And the question was really how serious the talks could be and whether or not they'd actually make real progress should he take that long trip and flight to Islamabad. And basically what threw a wrench into all of this was that the United States, Anderson, had sent the Iranians some broad points that they wanted them to agree to and say yes to before they even sat down at the negotiating table yet again. Basically, they wanted to see if they were serious and if they could actually make real progress. And what I'm told, Anderson, is that they had not heard anything back from the Iranians. That they had sent that proposal a few days ago. It had been virtual silence ever since then. Obviously, they were weighing, should the vice president get on a plane and go to Pakistan if they had not actually heard anything back from the Iranians. They were going to their intermediaries, as you just noted, the one that the president was praising there, Pakistan's army chief, trying to get an answer from the Iranians before J.D. Vance got on that plane, and basically had not heard anything. And that is what led the president today to come to this decision to extend this ceasefire. Now, the question is, why are they not hearing anything? Because the president has sounded very hopeful in recent days that they were close to getting a deal. As just on Friday alone, when he was leaving the White House, he sounded extremely hopeful that something could happen here. And so what we are told is that they believe that there's a huge fracture in the Iranian leadership and that they can't really come to a consensus, or it's not clear that the negotiators going to Islamabad would be able to say, hey, here's how much uranium we can enrich. Here's what we can do with the enriched uranium we already have. And so those are still open questions. And a lot of that has to do with the Supreme Leader himself. It's not clear if he's giving directions according to what our administration officials are saying to these officials, or if they're just simply assessing what they believe he wants here. And that's really what was happening, at least behind the scenes today at the White House, that led to this.
I think, Caitlin, is clear that the president doesn't want to go back to a full-blown war with Iran. At the same time, this has been an incredibly costly war for the United States, perhaps over $50 billion. So he needs to demand a strong deal. And I think he, at a minimum, needs to get a stronger deal than President Obama got. And he's hoping that with threats and intimidation, he can bring the Iranians to the table. But as you alluded to, this is a regime which has just experienced an enormous power vacuum. Even under normal circumstances, it oftentimes takes them many months to come to an internal consensus. And this isn't. This is an extraordinary circumstance. And so I think there's a huge disconnect between the president's sense of urgency to wrap this up and move on to other issues and just Iran's normal political culture.
I mean, based on even just their normal, pace and procedure for things, obviously we know how long it took for the original, the JCPOA deal to come together. What do you make of what we're hearing from officials on what they believe is this fractured Iranian leadership? That basically they don't know how to empower people who are coming to the table when it comes to making decisions on uranium. It's not clear if the Supreme Leader is giving direct orders. What's your sense of that?
I think, Caitlin, there's an enormous mistrust in Tehran of President Trump. You have to remember that on 2 occasions, while the United States and Iran were in the midst of negotiations, President Trump attacked Tehran. So even this time around, I get calls sometimes from Tehran with people believing that even the negotiations are simply a ruse for Iran to let its guard down, and the United States could well attack. And obviously, there's enormous mistrust on the U.S. end as well. I think even if a deal ends up being signed with Iran, very few people in Washington will believe that Iran has really renounced its nuclear weapons ambitions.
现在呢，我们看到，实际上美国和伊朗无论是在停火还是在谈判，在这两个问题上呢，都陷入到了一个罗生门。而在谈判的问题上，这个罗生门就更加的明显。那我们看到呢，美方是信誓旦旦，不断的来对外是显示说我们要即将开始和伊朗的谈判，但是呢，伊朗方面却谨慎得多。 伊朗方面一直是对于参与谈判表示了极度的这样的一个非常审慎的态度，但是呢，在这个过程当中，我们看到美国和伊朗在谈判的问题上，自己内部也都曾经出现过或多或少的这种不同的声音，所以这说明现在在两国的国内其实也对于谈判有着不同的看法，那么有不同的力量还在进一步的博弈。但说到底，现在美伊两国其实都对于通过政治方式来继续保持这种政治接触是有着一定的意愿的，都希望通过有限的成本来去控制当前的这样的一场局势。所以在当前的情况之下的话，没到最后关头，到底是否还会谈，其实还有待观察。那么有可能会进行一个短暂的延期，也有可能会进行一个 非常小规模的这样的一个军事摩擦，但是它对于整体的这个局势仍然是处于这种以打促谈、以压促变的整体逻辑，它是没有变化的。
播报新闻是我的日常，必须时刻保持妆容和皮肤的最佳状态。当来到人生中最重要的时刻，也是 KS 逆时奇迹帮助我轻松驾驭，闪闪发光。KS 逆时奇迹活肤露全效精华、精华霜，多达5种 EGF。 6大冻龄关键成分，保湿效果让我非常满意，小细纹也不再困扰我。我就是我自己的最佳女主角 ，KS 让我从容自信，光彩动人。我是我人生中的大女主，我的最爱我做主。KS 逆时奇迹系列热卖中，下单请上快点购，透过中天新闻网 App 下单立减50，或输入 CTI 推荐码有额外折扣。